Okay, so like everybody I know, basically we're all kind of obsessed with books, but actually like finding time to read them all, that's a whole other story, right?
Right.
My to read pile is basically like a fire hazard at
Yeah.
this point. And so when I heard about this podcast, it's called Lit Snippets. And they promise like, book insights and stuff without like a huge time commitment. I was definitely intrigued, to say the least. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you are too. You're a podcast person. I'm
Hmm.
a podcast person. So we are really going to dive deep into Lit Snippets today, figure out, like, does it deserve a spot in your rotation? We're going to unpack the format. We're going to get to know the hosts a little bit and see if this is the right, vibe for you.
I think what's so interesting about Lit Snippets, at least from the outset, is how it really seemed to tap into this struggle that I think a lot of book lovers have, which is that you want to stay, up on all the new releases and everything that's coming out, but there's just not enough time in the day.
Right, right.
You have your job, you have your life. So it's almost like they're providing like a cheat code, like a secret shortcut to those, I just finished an amazing book conversations without having to like do all the work.
Totally. Yeah, it's like grabbing coffee with your friends who like always recommend the best books. And speaking of friends, let's talk about Sam and Alex, who are the hosts of this podcast, Lit Snippets. And I will say, I was checking out their About Us page, and they totally get like the whole, time crunched reader struggle. Like Alex literally says, between work and, well, life, I can't waste time on books that don't grab me from page one,
Hmm.
which I feel like, yes.
I relate to that so much. And, as someone who, listens to a lot of podcasts, the thing that really stood out to me about their sort of like the description is this idea that it's, quote, no scripts, just genuine talk.
Okay. Interesting.
And I think authenticity is so important these days, especially in the world of like, podcasts and audio, where people can really like, they can sense a phony, you know what I mean?
Totally.
That focus on like genuine conversation, I think that could be a big, big draw for a lot of listeners.
So we've met Sam and Alex, but like how do those personalities actually translate into like the show's format and the style?
So they call their philosophy a manifesto,
Mm.
which I kind of love, first of
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But it's like no filler, straight to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Which, again, kind of like we were just talking about, like who has the time, right?
Yeah.
And they're very much all about conversational flow, which I know is something that's really important to you.
Mm.
And they have this one line that I jotted down, which is that they're interested in delivering the best parts without the fluff. And I was like, yes,
Giving efficiency,
it is.
which I feel like we can both get behind.
Absolutely, yes.
This is really interesting to me because I've definitely slogged through like, my fair share of incredibly dense book reviews and just been like, can you just cut to the chase? Like, tell me what's going to happen.
Totally.
But the question is, do you think this like conversational snippet style format like actually works when you're trying to like discover new books? Or do you feel like you're like, missing out on something?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me, I can see it being really effective, especially when it comes to like fiction, where it's like you just kind of want like a vibe. You want to like get a sense of the plot, maybe a little bit about the characters
Yeah.
without like getting too bogged down.
Totally.
Yeah. But I think this is something important for our listeners to know. Lit Snippets is described as being, quote, generative, which I think, we can kind of unpack what that means. But basically, they're leaning on some artificial intelligence and technology.
Yeah, it seems very like cutting edge, kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is really cool. But it also means that like, accuracy isn't necessarily guaranteed. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
That's not to say like, don't listen. But I think, manage your expectations, especially if you're someone who like, really needs like very, very precise information.
Yeah. They do say that like upfront though, which I appreciate. Like they're very like upfront about the fact that like, it's not perfect.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, in the spirit of transparency, they also they're very clear about the fact that they use affiliate links.
Okay, yeah. So going in, like
Exactly.
what the deal is.
Totally.
Okay, so it seems like it all boils down to this. To snip it or not to snip it?
That's the question.
Like, is that the question of the day?
Maybe it is, yeah.
It seems like they offer this really like interesting and kind of like unique approach, which is book discovery, but through like relatable and like time-saving conversations, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. And I think, for you as a listener, like, here's something to think about. You're someone who, you love to learn, you love having like genuine discussions. Could this be like a really engaging way to do it? Like, could it actually be more engaging than like, slogging through traditional reviews?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which can sometimes, honestly, feel a little dry.
Yeah, totally.
So, my advice would be give Lit Snippets a try. See what you think. You might be really surprised. You might hate it. But you might just find your next favorite author along the way.
You never know.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Until next time.
Happy listening.
Yeah, happy listening.